Okay, so this is just a quick video clip explaining about a case study of a factory that we need to study. So we're going to study one light industry and one heavy industry in Ireland. The light industry that we're going to study are Intel. You've most likely heard of them before. You've probably seen their little sticker on a laptop or a computer. They make microchips for computers and possibly for iPads and things like that. So a light industry that we're studying is Intel Ireland. Okay. Now, they basically are located in Leixlip in County Kildare, so practically on the doorstep of Dublin. Okay, so you can almost imagine loads of reasons why they chose to locate there. Imagine that they actually set up back in 1989, so they're there for a good number of years, we'll say over 30 years at this stage. So they located back in 1989 in Leixlip in County Kildare on a greenfield site. And as you can see the factory in front of you, that was once just green fields. Literally, it was a stud farm, I think it was back then. So they decided the stud farm wasn't running anymore. They closed it down. They sold it to Intel. Happy days, everybody was happy. As you can see in the map there in front of you, Leixlip is up on the top right-hand corner, okay, up on the northeast of County Kildare, literally, like I said, right on the doorstep of Dublin with access to loads of transport and workers and everything. So you're studying Intel, it's a light industry, and they've located in Leixlip in County Kildare. What did they manufacture? They manufacture microchips for the computer industry. So they're selling on microchips to other computer factories across Europe and across the world. So I suppose they manufacture microchips. It's a very complicated process. It's a very delicate process. You have to be really, really careful, and they need a lot of skilled and educated workers. The microchips, in case you're wondering, they're the brains of the computer. I mean, if your computer isn't working, the chances are the microchip has broken or it's at fault or something has gone wrong. So they're really, really important that when you're making them, that you make them correctly, and you know, the computer has to operate and function correctly. So microchips are the most important part of the computer. Intel employ around 4,500 people directly and indirectly. Like, that's a huge employer in Ireland. For the County Kildare and County Dublin region, that's a huge, even for the town of Leixlip, to have that many people employed. So we want to keep them here. When I say they employ 4,500 directly and indirectly, a lot of that number are people working in the actual factory in Leixlip, be it producing the microchips or working in the offices or working in the canteen inside Intel, or the cleaners. And indirectly, that would be the people, the trucker delivering the components, the resource materials. That would be the trucker bringing the finished microchips out to the port. That would be the security guard. It would be the local petrol station. It would be the local restaurants, the local cafes, the local shops. There's a big spin-off effect, you know, when a factory like that locates in a town. So they're a big employer. It's the largest Intel plant, largest Intel factory outside of the USA. That's really impressive because Intel have factories all over the world. So the fact that they chose Ireland to locate their second biggest factory is really impressive. They're really important to the Irish economy for two reasons. They employ a lot of people, 4,500, and they contribute a lot to the Irish exports. So what I mean by that is, the more we export out of our country, the more money we're making. We're selling products abroad. The fact that Intel are exporting microchips out of Dublin Port, that's keeping jobs going in Dublin Port. The more ships that we have sending out of Dublin Port, the more we're selling out. That's really, really good. So we really, really do like having Intel here in Ireland. So next I want to explain to you about the inputs, processes and outputs of Intel. And that's really important because you could be asked to write about this in a long question. So I suppose let's just start off with the inputs. What do they need to manufacture these microchips? Firstly, they need good access to electricity, and they have that up in Kildare in Leixlip. They have excellent access to electricity that's supplied to them by Electric Ireland. They need access to water. Water is a key input into the factory, and I'll be showing that to you shortly, that water is actually needed to cool down the microchips later on. So they need to access good purified water. Another input are the silicon wafers. And I know that's a big term now for you, but they actually, this is like the board that they put the microchips onto. If you were to open up your iPad or your phone, not that I'm suggesting you do that, but if you open up an iPad or a computer or a phone, you'll notice there's a board inside it with all these microchips on it. That's the brains of it. That's how it operates. So the silicon wafers are one of the important inputs. And you can see a picture there of a silicon wafer when it's done with all the microchips and the transistors and everything created on it. Another really important input is labour. Intel have and need access to highly qualified graduates in engineering and science. Where do they get them? From the nearby universities in Dublin and Maynooth. That's fantastic. They need to set up a clean room. This is another input as well inside an Intel in the factory. The clean room is really important. That's where they make and manufacture the microchip. You can't have any dust or anything in that room. They purify the air even in there. The workers are completely covered because you can't contaminate the microchips or the board because the computer mightn't work. So they also need another input, and that's the air purification systems. So it's like a ventilation unit that they have in all of those clean rooms. It literally sucks the dust out of the air and makes sure that the air is really, really clean so that the microchips can stay clean. Another obvious input is capital. They need money. Sure, Intel are a global multinational corporation, so they have plenty of money, but don't you know well that they need money, loans off of banks as well, and they probably get that from banks in America and possibly Irish banks too. So I hope you're okay with the inputs. The processes, so they have all of their resource materials. How do they make the microchips? In the clean room, the workers inside there have to wear special protective clothing to prevent dust from the body or the clothes getting onto the silicon wafers. Even like a strand of your hair falling onto that microchip, that could interfere with it working properly. Even in a lot of factories, they don't even allow you to wear nail varnish in case your nail varnish chips and it gets onto the microchips or onto the board. It could actually stop the microchip or the product from working. So you have to totally cover up to prevent anything from your clothing, nails, hair, any dust from the body or your clothes getting onto the silicon wafers. They basically manufacture the microchips on these wafers. So they put the silicon wafers into machines and the microchips are made and manufactured on those silicon wafers. Some of the names of the microchips would be Intel Core and Celeron. You might have heard of them before. So they go into the clean room, they cover up the workers, they work with the machines, they put in the silicon wafers and they manufacture the microchips on the silicon wafers. They also make huge numbers of transistors, okay, on the microchips. Okay, so transistors and microchips are everything that's created on the silicon wafer board. Then when they've made the microchips on the silicon wafer, they have to test it. Is it working? That goes to quality control. So they test it in a machine. If it passes the test, it goes down the line and somebody else packages it safely into the cardboard boxes, and then it's sent off to the markets abroad, possibly to another computer factory where they'll put it into an actual computer. The outputs out of the factory then are obviously the microchips. That's the biggest output out of the factory. So the microchips on the silicon wafer. Another input would be the waste products, such as the waste water. Like they needed to get in a lot of water. The water is used to cool down the microchips. So obviously it doesn't touch the microchips, but what they do is they sit the silicon wafers over like a bath of water and it cools it down because they're red hot when they come out of the machine and you need to cool it down before you can test it and package it. So they release that wastewater, they treat it first and then they release it back to the water system, which is brilliant. Another waste that they have coming out of the factory is solvent waste. Obviously, in making the product, they use a lot of chemicals and different products. So they dispose of them carefully by ringing a contractor in and they'll get rid of the product for them. Other waste products would be paper and cardboard that they have left over, possibly through products coming into the factory. So they recycle all of them. So I hope I've explained the inputs, processes and outputs okay for you. So a quick recap. Our light industry that we're studying is Intel. It located in Leixlip in Kildare in 1989. It's still there. They manufacture microchips. They're the brains of the computer. They employ a lot of people, 4,500. It's the second largest plant outside of, or it's the largest plant outside of America. It's very important in Ireland because it employs a lot of people. It contributes a lot to our exports, brings us money. The inputs: electricity to power up the factory, water to cool down the microchips, silicon wafers to build the microchips on them, workers, highly skilled workers, clean rooms to make sure that the microchip is kept clean, air purification systems to keep it dust free, capital, money to run the plant, pay the workers, pay the people that are supplying the raw materials, processes. The clean room needs to be dust free, worker needs to wear protective clothing. Microchips are processed on the surface of a silicon wafer. They test the microchips to see are they working. They package them. They send them out to the customer. Outputs then, they obviously the biggest output is the microchip. Send them off to factories abroad. Wastewater, treated and released. Solvent wastes, any packaging waste